Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, if you're watching this, I want people to be a little diligent. If you are watching this, you probably have the ability to look up federal medical assistance percentage, FMAP, as we call it. Medicaid is jointly funded between the state and the federal governments. Now, that's one of the key facts that the Democrats aren't telling you. And just factually speaking, it's jointly funded between the state and the federal governments. And there won't be anybody pushed off of the Medicaid rolls unless the states decide to push them off the Medicaid rolls. They're just making stuff up to scare you. Now, as far as the deficit under President Trump goes, I looked this up. One of the votes you talk about had 6 no votes in the House and passed by voice in the Senate. There are 2, Chip Roy and Andy Harris, are the only 2 no votes on that piece of legislation that are still here, not just in, it was $2+ trillion in spending. But I don't understand the Democrats' criticism of a piece of legislation that they voted for. I mean, it's just pure hypocrisy. It is the definition of hypocrisy. Now, I will tell you, I think we spent too much money under COVID, and I think hindsight's 20/20. But just factually speaking, under Donald Trump, every one of the deals that he did under COVID was done in a very broad bipartisan manner. And if I'm not mistaken, they all passed under suspension.
That's correct.
In the House of Representatives.
That's correct. That's correct. And the America Rescue Plan, to contrast the bipartisan nature of those COVID relief-related bills, the American Rescue Plan, which was the first use of the reconciliation process when the Democrats had total control, had 0 Republican support for it and $1 trillion still unspent from the previous COVID relief.
Let me ask you this. Total tax collections right now under the current tax code, $4.92 trillion, if I read it correctly. Has there ever been a higher tax collection?
We're at record rates of revenue.
So from best I can tell, there's been a lot of talk about the corporate income tax rate and the reduction there. Corporate tax collections seem to be higher than they've ever been in the history of the country as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Record revenue from corporations after we reduced their rate to a number that was not even in the top 25% for other developed countries we compete with around the globe.
So we have higher tax revenue than we've ever had,
and
and yet we still have a record deficit.
That's correct.
So there's no doubt something has to be done. We can either control the fall or the fall will control us, right? And what we want to do is to avoid any steep decline in the economy, because if we just want to talk about the facts, federal tax revenues over the course of a period of time, 3, 5, 10 years, are going to average 17% of the GDP of the country. Is that right? A fair statement?
That's fair.
I mean, so the key to getting us out of this problem that we're in with this deficit, and it's a problem for everybody, rich, poor,
right,
and everywhere in between, is that you grow the GDP of the country so that tax revenues will continue to increase, and you slow the growth of the spending. And that is pretty much what this resolution says we're going to do, correct?
It was the play that our country ran after World War II that allowed us to emerge as the only global superpower.
Well, all I know, the tax revenue is going to be a percentage of the GDP. If you turn around and let the current tax law expire, the tax law that's led to higher tax revenues than we've ever had in the history of the country, the giant sucking sound coming from the IRS, taking money out of the pockets of the American citizens and the business owners, is going to lead to a recession.
That's correct.
And if we have a recession, will we have higher or lower tax revenues?
Lower tax revenue.
Madam Chair, think I learned just the economic facts back in high school and maybe expanded on them a little bit in college, but I don't understand what the confusion here is. We have higher tax revenues than we've ever had in the history of the country. We still have an almost $2 trillion deficit. If we continue down this path, it's going to be a train wreck that is going to bankrupt virtually every American. We cannot allow these tax cuts to expire.
And undermine the sustainability of every government program. Whether you're for it, whether you supported it, every government program from farm bills to infrastructure to Medicaid, every program is in jeopardy of being undermined by a sovereign debt crisis. And
Did Texas have a surplus this year?
yes, sir.
So did Georgia. I think well-run states have a surplus, and I think that those state legislatures who have to balance their budget, just like we should, will in a bipartisan manner make sure that their people are taken care of, even if there is a small increase, a slight increase in the FMAP percentage that they would pay. And with that, Madam Chair, I yield.